I decided to file for divorce. My husband stormed out of the house, leaving behind our 3-year-old twins after his harsh words. And our newborn daughter. I had a hunch for some time that he was cheating, but between childcare and work, I had no energy to confront him. I can't do this anymore. Just then, one of the twins clung to me, saying, "Mommy, we love you." My beloved children looked up at me with worried faces. Despite my anger towards my husband, something clicked in me at that moment. I thought, well, I'll just file for divorce. I immediately signed the papers with a smirk. He doesn't realize how much I've been supporting him. Unknowingly, he had begun his descent into hell. Late again. How many times have I heard that? My name is Jennifer, and I'm 34. We got married 4 years ago, and he's 2 years younger than me, which led me to spoil him at first. The following year, we had twin girls, and 3 years later, another daughter. His return home started getting extremely late around the time our youngest was born. I hope the third one is a boy. I've always dreamed of playing catch with him. He was excited during the pregnancy, but his attitude soured as soon as he found out it was another girl. At the hospital, he grimaced when he saw our newborn daughter. "She doesn't look like me. She's not cute," he said. At that moment, intense anger welled up inside me. How could he say his own child wasn't cute? Maybe he was already considering divorce by then. Even after I came home from the hospital, his sulkiness continued. He barely helped with child care. "Show a little interest in the kids," I told him. "If you're short on hands, hire a babysitter or something. You've got savings from your job." I worked at a top-tier company, earning significantly more than most women my age. On the other hand, my husband struggled to keep a job, often quitting before I even noticed. Perhaps he was envious of my success. At the time, he was doing temporary work with no certainty of how long it would last. I didn't expect financial support from him, but I wished he'd at least fulfill his role as a father. Spend time with the kids at night, at least. But his response was always, "What a hassle." When I asked him to help, he reluctantly did it, but so half-heartedly that the girls were bored. He seemed to notice their indifference, which he didn't like, leading to a terrible cycle. Eventually, he stopped helping altogether. "I'm tired from work. Let me rest on the weekends," he'd say. So on weekends, he either stayed in his room or went out. "I have to work this holiday. If you don't watch the kids, I have plans too." "See you," he'd say, leaving without listening. I couldn't leave the kids alone, so I often had to scramble for a last-minute babysitter. If things continued this way, it would surely destroy our marriage and negatively affect our children. So, I decided to talk to my in-laws. The next day, I visited them. That's just how husbands are. A wife needs to be patient, they said. More importantly, could you do that thing we talked about last time? My concerns were ignored, and they asked for favors instead. My parents lived far away, so it was hard to meet them, and I felt guilty even calling. I didn't know who to turn to. "Hey, make dinner," my husband said, greeting me in pajamas when I got home that evening. The house was a mess, and the kids, bored with their toys, smiled when they saw me. "Where have you been all this time?" he asked. "I had to stop by the in-laws for a bit," I replied. "Hurry up and make dinner." "I'm starving," he said. "If you've been home all day, couldn't you do some laundry or clean the bathroom?" I asked, frustrated. He snorted in amusement. I decided not to do anything for someone who didn't appreciate it. "What do you mean?" "I cleaned the bathroom yesterday, and you didn't thank me." "Didn't I say thank you?" I asked. "Not that. I mean like at least $100, he said, stretching out his hand, asking for money. What was he talking about? I pulled him aside so the kids wouldn't hear and retorted, "I'm working, doing the chores, raising the kids, all of it, and you've never helped me." "That's a wife's job," he shot back. "Then what's your job?" "I work too," I said, knowing full well he barely earned $1,000 a month and did nothing around the house. Our argument lasted for an hour, until our daughter interrupted, "Mommy, I'm hungry." My husband stormed off, but I ignored him and rushed to prepare dinner. During those tense days, I discovered something devastating: my husband was cheating. I confided in a college friend who had divorced due to her husband's affairs. She advised me to gather evidence immediately. In truth, I had suspected the affair for some time, just before our youngest was born. He came home one day wearing a new perfume. When I casually asked him about it, he broke into a sweat and stuttered. His late nights, increasing silence, and cold attitude toward the children were all red flags. The final straw came when I found a lipstick in his jacket pocket. "It's mine." "My lips get chapped," he said, trying to brush it off. "You're using Chanel's pink lipstick?" I asked. "Maybe it's my mom's," he muttered. That night, I noticed a hickey on his neck, partially hidden by his shirt collar. I was about to confront him, but instead, I decided to gather evidence first. "Take your time warming up," I said with a smile, pretending I hadn't seen anything. The next day, after a late shift, I came home to find my daughters asleep and the house eerily quiet. In the dining room, my husband stood under the soft glow of the light, holding a piece of paper. "I can't take this anymore. Let's get a divorce." "What?" "Just file for divorce. I don't want the kids." Without waiting for my response, he handed me the divorce papers and left. "Mommy." The sound of the door closing woke up the twins, who looked at me with worried expressions. "It's okay." "Sorry for waking you," I told my daughters, trying to comfort them, but inside, it clearly wasn't okay. "He's reached his limit, that's my line." And what did he mean he doesn't want the kids? Mixed emotions swirled in my head, and I hadn't even noticed the tears streaming down my face. "Mommy, we love you," the twins said, sensing something was wrong, and they hugged me tightly. At that moment, I came to my senses. I can't go on like this. I can't worry these little girls. I realized that as long as I have my children, I'm happy, and this is what I should have done from the start. "Well, I'll just file it," I said with a weary look on my face. My daughter smiled, and we all slept soundly that night. The next day, I filed the divorce papers first thing in the morning and called a certain person. "Yes, please go ahead with it." "It's my husband who will have trouble," I said, my voice steady. The person on the phone listened to my story and took action. This was something I had considered before. If my husband betrayed me, I would end everything we had been doing. If that ruined his life, it was none of my business. 3 days later, I came home from work and found my in-laws and husband waiting for me. My mother-in-law was furious, my father-in-law looked pale, and my husband seemed clueless, dragged along without understanding the situation. "Have you been waiting at the front door all this time?" "That's kind of creepy," I remarked. "This is no time for that." "What is this?" My mother-in-law thrust a letter at me. "It's a notice from a lawyer." "I can see that much," I said calmly, as her face turned tomato red in anger. "I need to pick up my daughters, so excuse me." Ignoring their protests, I walked inside, but my furious in-laws followed me into the living room, insisting on a discussion. "Why would you suddenly send this?" "I don't understand," my mother-in-law shouted. "You would understand if you read the letter, wouldn't you?" I replied. "Using a lawyer. How cowardly," she snapped, despite her son being in the wrong. Her outrage was something else, mixed with irritation and confusion. Finally, my husband, who seemed to understand nothing, spoke up. Are you upset because I divorced you? Filing some kind of complaint. His parents looked at him, dumbfounded. Of course, he had no idea what I had done for them all these years. Wait, what? I didn't hear about any divorce. Is that why this is happening? My father-in-law asked, shocked. Such a useless son. My husband, still clueless, looked confused. What are you two so anxious for? You've ruined everything. Wait, what are we even talking about? He asked, as the conversation between them went nowhere. My mother-in-law slammed the table. Why did you divorce Jennifer? She demanded. My husband clammed up, uncomfortable under the pressure. Since the conversation was going nowhere, I decided to answer for him. He completely failed to fulfill his duties as a husband and father. There you go again. I told you, that's just how men are, my mother-in-law said dismissively. Right, so you would forgive your husband if he had an affair? I asked. My mother-in-law froze, clearly not expecting to hear that her son had been unfaithful. My husband tried to interject, but a sharp glare from me shut him up. Then, oddly, my father-in-law started defending his son. A man's affair is just a fling. It's not a problem. This is pointless. Please leave. Any further communication will need to go through my lawyer, I said firmly. So, what are you talking to a lawyer for now? You agreed to the divorce, right? My husband asked, confused, still clueless about the gravity of the situation. Agreeing. I filed for divorce straight away. Then what is all this about? He asked, growing agitated. While arguing with my husband, my mother-in-law suddenly started crying loudly. Paying $56,000 in one lump sum is impossible. Wait, what large sum? What are you talking about? Who's paying whom? My husband asked, even more confused. Finally, the moment had come. It was time for my husband to regret everything. I proudly revealed what I had kept hidden until now. Right after we got married 4 years ago, I was called to my in-laws' house alone. My mother-in-law said she had a serious matter to discuss. Nervous because she was his mother, I was prepared to help. However, I was completely unprepared for the shocking words that came out of her mouth. I need $60,000, she said, leaving me utterly confused. As I hesitated, she bluntly asked about my salary. Unable to withstand the pressure, I admitted it was over $100,000, and her eyes lit up. Apparently, my father-in-law had gotten into horse racing, losing large amounts without ever winning and accumulating significant debt. Desperate to cover his losses, she pleaded with me for the $60,000, promising to pay it back. Feeling cornered, I couldn't say no. She repeatedly assured me that she would repay the money, but after 4 years, I had only received $4,000 back. There were times when she made small repayments, only to borrow again. Realizing that if I didn't take action, I might never recover the full amount, I hired a lawyer and filed a lump sum claim for the remaining $56,000. When my husband heard this, his jaw dropped, and I almost laughed. But we said we'd pay you back little by little. Why suddenly in full? He asked, incredulous. We're no longer family, so I thought I shouldn't hold back, I replied coolly. At this, my mother-in-law, with a screech like a banshee, turned her fury toward my husband. It's your fault for cheating, so you should be the one to pay it back. Huh? Why should I? We're not working anymore, and our pension won't cover it, he stammered. If you want me to live in your parents' house, you'll do what I say, she demanded. There was no way he could repay $56,000 in one lump sum, especially since he was unemployed at the time. I'll live at Brian's place, so I won't pay, he said nonchalantly. That's the name of your affair partner? I asked, growing more absurd by the second as I listened to their family quarrel. It was time to deliver the final blow. Don't think it ends with $56,000. I'm demanding $20,000 each from you and your affair partner as compensation, plus child support, of course. What? That's not fair. I didn't cheat, he protested. Had you forgotten so quickly about loudly declaring you'd live with Brian? I said, sighing as I handed him a pile of photos I had prepared for this very moment. Looking at these makes me sick, I added. The photos were from his social media, showing him kissing and embracing his affair partner, evidence that my lawyer confirmed would hold up in court. Why do you have these? My husband asked, panic creeping into his voice. A quick online search brought up your social media. It's amazing you thought it wouldn't be found, I said. My naive husband had been posting cheerful photos on a public setting, completely unaware of how visible they were. Even my in-laws gaped at him, dumbfounded. Please leave now. It's time to take the girls to daycare, I said firmly. At least don't demand compensation from Brian. What if she runs away? My husband pleaded. That's not my problem, I replied coldly. With no resolution in sight, I forcefully kicked them out of the house. Open the door. Help me. I didn't know about the debt. I could hear my husband yelling through the door for a while. I'm calling the police. I shouted, and the three of them eventually shrugged and left. A year has passed since then. After paying me the compensation, the affair partner disappeared, leaving my ex-husband to deal with the fallout. He now lives with his parents, who incessantly demand he cover the remaining $56,000. To make matters worse, he ended up borrowing from shady lenders. While he managed to pay off some of the debt quickly, he still owes $20,000 in compensation for the affair, plus $500 a month in child support. Now, he earns a daily wage doing manual labor from morning till night. The interest on his debt continues to balloon, and it's unlikely he'll ever pay it off in his lifetime, but that's none of my business. Mommy, we're going to be late, my daughters called out, pulling me out of my thoughts. Oops, it's time to take them to daycare. They're growing up healthy and strong, and that's all the happiness I need.